Is it in you?
Come on.
Is it in you? Brothers and sisters, to the naked eye, John, the author of this specific text, according to many scholars, can give a confusing perspective of the events at the cross. To one who is not a theologian, just your ordinary Bible scholar who does in-depth studies on the mysteries of God's inspired word, can read this text and be left mystified. In this 19th chapter and 28th verse, John's words can seem a little off-kilter and can possibly leave one a bit perplexed. Needless to say, I have an issue. I have an issue because John begins the 28th verse saying something extremely strange. He says, after this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, John communicates to his audience that Jesus knew that all things were now accomplished. John, an eyewitness of the events at Calvary, speaks for Jesus and says that all things were now accomplished. Accomplished meaning complete or done. Now signifies in the context that it was written that the completed work was in its present tense.
All right.
In other words, John suggests that at that point in time, all things were completed. It can be a bit troubling because John quotes the sixth saying from the mouth of Jesus just 2 verses later in the same chapter. So how can all things be accomplished now when there are still things left for Jesus to do?
All right.
It's not rocket science for us believers to know that there are more things to come before we can pin this Friday as good. But we also know that there has been some things that have been completed. Our Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. His accusers and his murderers, forgiveness was already completed. Assuredly I say unto you, today shall you be with me in paradise. The robber who hung on the cross next to Jesus, his salvation was already completed. Woman, behold thy son, and son, behold thy mother. He put his mother in the hands of John, and John in the hands of his mother. So his mother's safety and John's future nurturing was already completed. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Jesus realizes that one of the hardest times of this suffering was God turning his back on him. But guess what? That had already been completed. And since all of that was completed, John writes, after this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now completed and now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, I thirst. Here's the part that most people miss. Jesus already turned down a drink. In Matthew 27 verse 34, it says they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed it with gall, but after Jesus tasted it, he refused to drink it. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, gall was poisonous liver bile. And it was their custom to mix it with sweet wine, and it was given to deaden the pain of dying. All right. But Jesus refused to drink it. Jesus had no interest in curbing the pain by consuming a poison. In the garden, watch this. In the garden of Gethsemane, and Pastor already tapped into my sermon. In the garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed, Father, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. But before he was home, he refuses to drink the wine that was mixed with poison to dull the pain. Please don't miss this. Jesus drinks the cup of suffering, but he passes up a cup of comfort. Oh, you get that on the way home. So Jesus exclaimed, I thirst. Now a vessel full of sour wine was sitting there, and they filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on hyssop, and put it to his mouth. What was so different about this drink that Jesus receives now rather than the drink that Jesus refused earlier? Well, in those days, the Roman soldiers used to get extremely sick from the water in Jerusalem. Therefore, they would mix the sour wine, which was wine that passed its time and turned into vinegar, with Jerusalem's water. The soldiers would mix the sour wine and water together, hoping to kill the bacteria in Jerusalem's water. Walk with me. Thirst. Thirst in Hebrew means dipsao. Everybody say that with me. Dipsao, which means to suffer thirst. Suffer from thirst figuratively. Those who are said to thirst, who painfully feel their want of and eagerly long for those things by which the soul is refreshed, supported, and strengthened. What do you mean, preacher? Well, there was a two-part thirsting in here. Jesus, fully divine and fully man, was thirsty. His human side thirsted for a drink, but his divine side was thirsty for you and I to have life. His human side was greatly parched, but his divine side was heavily parched for our salvation. His human side called for something to drink, but his divine side was screaming for our souls to be saved. Go ahead. His being thirsty physically was symbolism for him being thirsty spiritually. I almost forgot to tell you, and I'm going to my seat. The scholars, the same scholars, they do believe that the water and the wine mixed, the water and the wine that was mixed together, that Jesus received and consumed, acted as first century Gatorade. All right, let me help you out. If that's true, church, Jesus needed to replenish his electrolytes so that the rest of the work can be completed. And the other day, I saw the commercial, the Gatorade commercial, and their slogan asks us, "Is it in you?" I really wish I had the time to do this like I wanted, but in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But in the 14th verse, the Word became flesh. So God got with Jesus and had a majestic meeting. We can ride now. Had a majestic meeting and asked Jesus, "Is it in you to go down and save a world, a sin-sick world?" And Jesus answered, "Yes, Father, it is in me. I will leave my home in glory and save that sin-sick world." He confirmed that it was still in him when he ended his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. He confirmed that it was still in him when he forgave them, when he granted salvation unto the hanging thief, put his mother in the care of John, and John in the care of his mother, and endured the pain of God turning his back on him. He confirmed that it was still in him when he screamed, "I thirst," because his spiritual being was in the home stretch, but his